Greetings and welcome, people. Looks like I've come out on the bike today, excuse me, at just the wrong time. Oh my word. Still, get some filtering practice in. Thanks for nothing, mate. Driving along, eating your tea. Yes, as I say, I hope to get out earlier. I wanted to get out this morning, but the weather was looking very iffy this morning. Very heavy, overcast clouds. So I took the car out this morning instead. And then, of course, because I've done that, the weather clears up this afternoon, and it is glorious. Get a bit of ventilation there. It's getting rather steamed up, and that's with a an anti-fog inner visor. So it's confession time. I must say, it's been a while since I've put up any videos, and that's principally because I've been really banging my head against the editing process. I've got a couple of videos in the editing queue on my machine at the moment, and excuse me, every time I sit down to try and progress the editing on them, I just run into a block. I mean, it's a bit silly really, because the footage is already there. It's on the machine. All I've got to do is try and make something even a little bit watchable out of it. So maybe that just goes to show how bad it is really, if even I, as the creator of the video, can't make anything decent out of it, or am struggling to make anything decent out of it. Yeah, I'm going to keep trying. I'm not going to give up on them, but I thought I'd get out and do a short video today. But, as I say, unfortunately I seem to have picked the worst possible time. But I think once I get away from the outskirts of the built-up areas, it shouldn't be too bad. Well, having said that, I am heading up to, whoa, what was that? Heading up to a level crossing, which, if the barriers are down, is going to be quite busy. But what I thought I'd use this little ride to talk about. Now, I know I've made a video before when I've heard about something that the government or somebody is talking about making legislation about. It was quite a while ago now, I think it might even have been last year, where I'd heard that they were thinking about bringing in legislation to outlaw even the use of Bluetooth hands-free devices, effectively saying you can't use any sort of device to talk or whatever while you're driving. obviously, my concern at the time, and I think it was a concern somebody else raised as well, was that that it might affect people doing what I'm doing at this exact moment in time, which is basically using a Bluetooth connected headset to record commentary to my phone. Now, as it seems, at the moment, nothing further has come of that, and I think I did mention at the time that sometimes the government does float ideas for things it is thinking about doing, just to gauge the reaction, and possibly they got enough negative reaction on that to say, no, that's probably not worth doing. And I think I mentioned at the time that sometimes it's not so much the legislation itself that's the problem, it's how it's drafted and how it is interpreted in real life by police and other bodies. Now, the latest thing I've heard, not on that, on something completely different, is a proposal to outlaw, to make it illegal to ban any owner or user modification of their bike, anything. Now, the comment I read in there was that it seemed to be leaning towards anything that would have an effect on emissions. So I'm assuming that would include things like aftermarket exhaust, removal of catalytic converters, any changing to the mapping of a fuel injection system, anything along those lines. In the case of my bike, which is carbureted, it would probably, if my bike was included in that, it might include things like changing the jets, changing the air filter, that type of thing. Now, obviously, as before, these are just proposals that are being kicked around, and it may be again that they decide that the amount of negative reaction is not worth the hassle. Obviously, most politicians are mindful of their chances of still being in their position after the next election, so if they think something's going to be too unpopular, they'll, as they say, kick it into the long grass, let somebody else worry about it another day. And the other side of that is, as I say, these are just broad proposals at the moment. How that would affect an older machine like mine, or any other person's older machine, I don't know, because at the moment, a couple of years ago, I needed to replace the right-hand silencer on this machine because it had just basically rotted through underneath. There was a big hole. It wasn't making any loud noises or anything, but it just basically would have failed an MOT if it had gone in for it like that. And I was able to locate effectively a new old stock silencer off of eBay for decent money. I think at the time you could still get the silencers for this machine from Amazon, from Triumph, but they were something like £300-400 each, and I got this replacement one off of the seller who bought it for his bike, but had never actually got round to installing it. So it was basically brand new, in the box, never been used, and I think that I ended up paying something like £120 all in. So that was a bit of luck. The seller actually had both left and right, but unfortunately money for me was a bit tight at the time, and I could only afford one of them. If I'd had the money, I definitely would have bought both. So, obviously, yes, my bike is, for the most part, at the moment, currently unmodified, but it does have aftermarket braided brake hoses. It does have aftermarket front brake discs and rear discs. So if that legislation does encompass bikes like mine, older bikes, I'm in big trouble, because it is, in some areas, non-standard. But obviously nothing I've done to this bike affects the emissions. But as I say, the big problem comes in how that legislation is drafted, as to what is likely to be the overall effect. It might be that they say, well, this applies to bikes made after, or they might say it's applied to bikes made after a certain time, or they might say it's not retroactive, but anything from now on forward to go on any bike has to be OEM. Now that means I'm going to be in the proverbial without the proverbial, because if I need another exhaust for this bike, if I drop it and crack the one that's on there now, or the left-hand one decides to give up the ghost, I'm not going to be able to get a replacement, not a Triumph replacement. And it might be argued that changing the exhaust has a knock-on effect to the emissions. It might be, I don't know. We do know generally that putting a freer flowing exhaust on a bike or any engine can lean out the mixture, which actually would be quite good, because that would mean there would be less emissions coming out of the engine. But this is something that could be a bit of a concern. I mean, we all know that lots of people with bikes love to personalise them, shall we say. We all know what my opinions are on people who, or not people, but putting things like loud exhausts and small number plates on bikes, LED lighting, underlighting and that type of thing. I mean, I'm not a 5-year-old child, so LED lighting doesn't appeal to me. There's probably people out there now watching this going, oh, I've got LED lighting on my bike, you bugger, I'm going to unsubscribe, if they were subscribed in the first place. But it was basically first mooted by the ever lovely organisation, the EU. And while we were still members of the EU, we obviously would have had to implement that legislation. But since the UK has now left the EU, it's been 2 years now, 2.5 years since we left. Or was it a year and a half? Can't remember. It was thought, to be honest, I'd forgotten all about this. So I had heard about this a few years ago, and nothing seemed to come of it. So I thought it had gone away. But the mention in this article was that after we left the EU, it was thought that we would just drop that and it wouldn't become part of our regulations. But apparently, and I'm assuming this might be at the behest of some people in power who are still in favour of being in the EU. We know this. We know people are still out there that want us to go back into the EU, or if we're not in the EU, they want us to be subject to the same rules and regulations as EU member states. So I think they're trying to push this through, saying, well, if the EU are going to do it, we should do it as well, for no good reason other than the EU are doing it. Obviously they're going to frame it in terms of, well, people are messing about with their bikes, they might be making them unsafe, they might be making them extra polluting, all this sort of thing. They'll come up with a way of making it sound like it's for our good. I mean, most of the rules are couched in terms of being for our own good, when really all they're doing is imposing restrictions on us for their convenience, not ours. I will try and find marvellous a link to the item or an item like it. But as I say, this is basic proposals at the moment. It could be done for testing the water. It might not ever actually proceed. But obviously we are getting more and more talk now about government tightening more and more control over road users. And obviously with the increasing popularity of electric vehicles, which are obviously controlled by software and firmware, it is ever more and more likely that some form of speed control or speed monitoring, centralized speed monitoring, will be built into vehicles that are more modern, have all the electronics. I mean, obviously with things like Tesla and other Google self-driving cars, things like that. While in the UK, I doubt very much whether they'd ever legally permit self-driving cars, autonomous cars. They could use that technology to impose control on vehicles so that they, based on their GPS location, know what the speed limit is and will refuse to go any faster than that. Now that will either be done as a positive and affirmative control of the vehicle, to say you're pressing the accelerator but you're travelling at say 30 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone, so I'm not going to go any faster, or whatever the speed limit of that piece of road happens to be. Lots of and ahs, sorry about that. It's probably because I'm just winging this, just coming up with something to talk about while I'm out riding. Or it could be just something as insidious as the control systems on the car will log your speed and your location, and basically at some point in a week or two's time you'll get a fine through the post saying you exceeded the speed limit at this location on this date and time, you owe us £60 or £120 or whatever, and you now have 3 points on your licence. Now I suppose I'm a bit of a goody two-shoes when it comes to behaviour on the road. I do not approve of or would ever condone doing wheelies, stoppies, travelling at ridiculously high speeds, overtaking and breaching solid white lines unless permitted to do so by the regulations. But even I would be concerned at how much control is being imposed on us as supposedly free individuals to enjoy our vehicles and the roads. Now, I'm not saying again that I believe that we should be allowed to drive as fast as we like and do whatever we like on the roads. Obviously not. There would be pandemonium, chaos and carnage. But it's another thing when technology is being used to snoop on us on an everyday basis for no other reason than to catch us out on that one occasion we slipped 2 or 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. I mean, with that sort of thing in mind, it has come up ever so often that the police are talking about implementing zero tolerance on speed limits and breaking the speed limit. And a lot of people at the time point out that what would you rather have drivers do? Drive watching the road or drive watching their speedos? Surely it's better that drivers avoid obstacles and other things on the road than not go 1 or 2 miles an hour over the speed limit. But then the other side of having zero tolerance is that you have to have the officers out on the roads catching people travelling over the speed limit. And obviously the police are too busy doing other things like monitoring people's Facebook posts. Ooh, is that a bit contentious? Well, I'm sure they would rather not be doing that, but that seems to be the way things are. So as I say, I'll try and find the link to the article. Again, it seems to be just proposals at the moment, but unless people object to these things, they'll go, oh, nobody minds, we'll do it. So if I find it, maybe folks in the UK, if they think it's something that's likely to be a problem, can contact their MP. But until something is more clearly defined, it's difficult to say exactly how far-reaching these things will be. And of course the press and the media are going to do everything they can to try and scare the proverbial out of us. By, shall we say, over-egging the pudding. They don't very often take a wait-and-see approach. They take a let's scare the living what's-its out of everybody now before it's proven to be an inaccurate story. It's actually a rather lovely evening now. It is quite a bit cooler than on my previous rides, as you can tell by the return of the normal jacket. I haven't got the liner in, but it's reasonably comfortable. Probably a little bit on the cool side, but then I'm not travelling too fast because of the traffic all around. So I hope to get the other videos done. I don't know whether I'm going to get any more videos recorded anytime soon, because apparently after today the weather is turning to the proverbial SH1T, heavy rain pretty much for the next week, but we shall see. Yes, I don't know why I'm having trouble with these other videos. They're nothing too complex. And in fact, in at least one of them, I do talk about things to do with the cameras and such, so I'm not going to make any more changes to camera setup at the moment until I've discussed what I'm doing, or until I've posted the videos where I discuss what I'm doing. I think I'm going to put up my visor in a minute. It's getting a bit dark. That is one of the most awful bits of road around this place. Oh, that has got dark now. I'm going to have to put my visor up. But before I do that, I think I'll call that the end of the video. So thank you very much for taking a look. It's good to be back out on the bike. I hope you're all enjoying your bikes again. Watching a lot of your videos that you're posting, making me feel a bit ashamed of myself that I'm not getting out and doing the same. But hopefully I'll get that changed in the coming weeks. So thank you for watching. Ride safe, be safe, and I'll speak to you again on the next one, or possibly on one of the previous ones. You never know. Cheerio for now. Bye.